I'm Chris Earl Phillips. For more information, check out our website, the all-new My1071thepoint.com.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You are listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host for this hour. We have an exciting lineup for you today. We will be joined about quarter after the hour by Clayton Cramer, a world-renowned firearms expert, author, published in numerous documents, testified before Congress, all related to Second Amendment rights. And that ties in well this morning with our bullet points, because this morning the White House has announced that they are readying 19 executive orders on firearms because they are concerned and afraid that they cannot get legislation passed through Congress. Our imperial president, our dictator-in-chief, is basically considering 19 different executive orders to limit your Second Amendment rights to own firearms. Ladies and gentlemen, I would posit the theory that 19 executive orders on one topic, outside the law, outside the scope of our system of government, which declares that no one of the three branches is superior to the other three, or the other two, and that a president who attempts to make declaratory laws and rules is no longer a president, but an imperial king, is unconstitutional. The White House has identified 19 executive actions they intend to move unilaterally on gun control. Their intention is to employ lawless power to limit your ability to own, possess, and or use assault weapons and any other gun or ammunition that they so choose. New York State has announced this morning that they will be requiring a 5-year registration window for every gun owner, and that if you do have an assault weapon in your possession, it will not be grandfathered, and at the end of your life must be turned over to the state. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest that we have reached the point where we will either immediately begin the process of utilizing the Rosa Parks method to defend our abilities and our rights, or we have lost our republic. There is only one option open to us as members of the republic. We must peacefully declare our government out of control. Now, there is a Texas congressman who has made it very clear that in the event that this president were to employ executive orders, that he would be more than happy to begin the process of impeachment. And I strongly recommend that you contact your House of Representatives member, because all impeachment processes must begin in the House, and insist that in the event that even one single executive order is employed in an attempt to do an end run around Congress related to gun control, that the House immediately begin impeachment procedures. Texas Republican Steve Stockman has threatened that in the event the Obama administration were to file articles that were to file executive orders, that he would file articles of impeachment. Such an executive order would be unconstitutional and infringe on our constitutionally protected rights to keep and bear arms. I will seek to thwart this action by any means necessary, including but not limited to eliminating funding for implementation, defunding the White House, and even filing articles of impeachment. If the president is allowed to suspend constitutional rights based upon his own personal whims, our free republic has effectively ceased to exist. Ladies and gentlemen, these are dire and serious times. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
You just, in your opening monologue, was speaking to executive orders that Obama had issued.
Well, he hasn't issued them yet, but he's.
Well, you got the. What I took from it was when a president makes an executive order, you take that to be an abuse of power. And I wanted to point out that Ronald Reagan had 381 total executive orders issued. Now, was he a dictator?
What I'm saying is that the executive order itself is the issue, not the power to issue.
Exactly, the executive order is the issue.
Excuse me. Let me answer your statement, Chuck.
Okay. Thank you for remembering my name.
If you issue an executive order, it is to execute an existing law. It is not to create new law by subverting Congress. And no executive order can override your constitutional rights.
Exactly.
And so in the event that the president were to attempt to utilize executive authority in an attempt to eviscerate the Second Amendment, it is an impeachable offense because he will have violated his oath of office and his oath to the Constitution and to the people of the United States.
Okay, but long as we're clear about this, 381 total executive orders issued by Ronald Reagan.
But you're hung up on the order, not the content. The content of the order is what matters, not the actual order itself.
All of
the ability to issue an executive
elected officials.
Every
single executive order circumvents our elected officials.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does. That's why we have a Congress.
No, it does not. What an executive order does is make clear that they are executing an existing law, and he's then pushing through the ability for whatever organization, department, or whatever the case may be, to utilize that to execute a law that is previously passed. Right now, the number one rule that you have to look back to is in the event that you have a question about Second Amendment rights, see the Constitution. That's rule number one. And the Constitution says that the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed.
Quick, let's give felons guns.
Quite frankly, I agree with that policy. I think you should give felon guns. Here's
a bad idea, bud. You know that.
Why? No, it isn't. If you have been convicted, well, before you laugh and throw your diatribe out there, let me clarify the point, because I've said this on the air before. I am personally, I am a felon. I'm not dangerous. I'm not dangerous to you or your family or society at large. I'm not a criminal. I won't rob a bank. I won't shoot up a school. That's not who I am. And yet, I am also barred from owning firearms. People who commit a crime when they are 18 or 20 years old and get caught with a bag of weed, as an example, and have a felony on their record when they are 45 or 50 years old are barred permanently from owning a firearm for a mistake that occurred 25 years prior.
Oh, I absolutely
agree. So when you talk about felons, be careful how you characterize that, because a blanket statement of ban all felons from all firearms ownership is a misnomer. And in addition to that, it is also an unconstitutional statement, and I'll tell you why. Our founding fathers made it clear that once you had served your time and once you had paid your debt to society, you were no longer considered a felon. So if we were to go by what our founding fathers indicated, if I'm answering your question, if we had gone by what our founding father, if you want to continue to interrupt me, I'll just shut your mic off, because let's be honest, this is my show. So if you go by what our founding fathers had said, then you would know that once you have served your time, you are not able to continue to adjudge that person and limit their rights. Now, the only time I would agree with banning a felon from owning or possessing a firearm is when that felon has already been convicted of a crime of violence that involved a firearm and or has shown a pattern of lawlessness that would prohibit that individual from ownership. Go ahead. I'll give you the last word.
Well, thank you. If that were the views of the majority of Americans,
yeah, I don't care what the majority of Americans say.
I know you don't care.
What the
That's
Constitution.
Why you told me Mitt Romney was going to win, even though the polling showed he wasn't.
It's what the Constitution says. I don't remember telling you Mitt Romney was going to win.
Oh yeah, come on! You were campaigning, telling me how the whole country was going to go to hell in a handbasket if Mitt didn't win, and he didn't win.
And it is going to hell in a handbasket. Look at 19 executive orders being issued by a de facto dictator.
381 by Ronald Reagan.
George Washington issued one too. It's not the executive order privilege. It's the fact that it can be used. It's the fact that it can be misused, Chuck. And that's the simple reality.
And I'm willing to say get rid of the executive order altogether.
I frankly would be okay with that. I would be okay with that too.
But I'm not hearing you criticize the 381 of Ronald Reagan yet. It circumvents our elected officials.
All executive orders are unlawful. To be honest with you, if you really want to look down at the root cause of this, all executive orders are unlawful.
That's what I wanted to hear you say.
Because a president who issues an executive order that, quite frankly, subverts Congress is a dictatorial, empirical president. Okay, and that's not what we do. We believe in an elected president. And we believe in an elected president and a Congress that has the right to make laws. The president cannot make laws as a standalone individual.
Well, no, he can. It's called the executive order. That's what we're fussing over. The problem is that I want...
You want to chase rabbits, and I'm not going to go there with you. Here's the deal. We got 30 seconds left, and I've got a guest coming on called Clayton Cramer. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to be aware and join us for Clayton Cramer's discussion. He'll be on with us after the break. And please make sure that you're here for that. You can find his website at ClaytonCramer.com. He also has a blog out there, which I strongly encourage you to find out information on and read. He has been testified before Congress and has numerous documents and books that he has written. He has public speeches and tons of legislative testimony. He is considered a de facto expert on Second Amendment rights, firearms, and we are going to have him join us after the break. I would encourage you to make sure that you look at, that you also visit some of our friends who are our supporters. You can find a couple of our supporters at our batterystation.com. You can find them at 303 Washington Avenue, and the number for you to reach them at is 257-7799. We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you very much.
Papi.
Yes, mija.
I love walking around our block.
Me too.
It's just like walking around the world, but it doesn't take as long.
That would take a long time.
No, really. My friend Kayla's from India, and Lily's family is from China. And Beza travels a lot to see her family in Ethiopia.
And don't forget the Murphys.
I really like our neighborhood and all the families from different places.
We're lucky, sweetie. We live in a diverse community.
Diverse?
Yeah. It's a place where people from all different backgrounds come together and live, and share, and appreciate everything that makes us special.
I like it.
Neighborhood diversity promotes a greater sense of engagement, teaches that stereotypes are wrong, and better prepares our children for the global community. To learn more about how the Fair Housing Act promotes diversity, visit hud.gov/fairhousing. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status. A message from the Department of Housing and Urban Development in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
America's Voice Now with Michael Evans.
right, we are going to be joined by Mr. Clayton Cramer. I encourage you and ask you to find his website at claytoncramer.com. Mr. Cramer, as I'd mentioned previously, is a well-known expert on firearms issues surrounding not only just weapons themselves, but also in relation to mental health issues and so forth. Good morning, Clayton. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with our audience.
Okay.
News this morning is that the Obama administration is looking at 19 executive orders to limit our Second Amendment rights. That in addition to that, Governor Cuomo in New York has made a declaration that firearms owners must be licensed every 5 years, and at the end of your life, your firearm would not be grandfathered to be able to be transferred, that you must turn it into the state for confiscation. And I think they're missing the bigger picture. Your thoughts?
Yeah, they're missing the bigger picture. In the case of the recent murders in upstate New York that got all the attention, the person in question was a convicted felon who, by law, cannot even possess ammunition, much less a firearm. So,
you're talking about Lanza?
No, upstate New York.
Oh,
the guy who
fired on the cops.
Houses,
yeah,
and then fired on the firefighters and killing two of them. He was a convicted felon, could not legally possess firearms. It is hard to see how a licensing scheme with renewals is going to make any difference at all in a case like that.
Sure.
This is simply an attempt to find ways to discourage gun ownership. The other problem, however, is that no one really wants to be, at least at the national level, seems very interested in discussing what is the core problem here. And the core problem is that in 1960, for example, this would have been an inconceivable crime. We had one random act of mass murder in the 1960s that I can remember, and that's at the University of Texas. Other than that, it was shocking because these things just didn't happen.
Sure.
From the 1980s forward, these are not rare events anymore. They happen with increasing frequency, and it's not because guns suddenly became more available. It's because in the 1970s we made the decision to empty out our mental hospitals.
Right. And in addition to that, it coincides with the pumping of our American citizens with all kinds of antidepressant drugs, which, quite frankly, all come with warnings that ought to tell you everything that you need to know about the taking of that.
Yeah, well, many of the antidepressants contain warnings about the dangers of suicide. And it is certainly the case that a lot of people take antidepressants because the alternative is to address the deeper problems in their life, like an unhappy marriage, an abusive employer, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But the real difficulty here is that an awful lot of people with serious mental illness problems that would have been hospitalized in, say, 1960 or even 1970 because they were showing clear signs that they had lost touch with reality. Today, you pretty much have to kill someone before there's any real chance that you're going to be hospitalized in most states.
Agreed. And unfortunately, the problem is that the damage is already done in that case. And, at this stage in the game, what we have is a group of individuals who met with the vice president as if the president and the executive office were really waiting for any recommendations from Mr. Biden. And they have a predestined agenda, and they are now implementing it with what I would classify as unconstitutional executive orders. Now, you taught U.S. constitutional history at Boise State University.
Right.
What are your opinions of the issue of executive orders, one, and executive orders specifically overriding a constitutional limitation on government, two?
Well, I'll have to see what the actual executive orders are. There are some things that the administration could actually do that would probably be useful. One of them is they could actually tell their own Department of Justice to enforce the existing law. Right now, there's been quite a substantial reduction in enforcement of the existing federal ban on convicted felons in possession of firearms. The Obama administration has shown much less interest in enforcing that law than the Bush administration did, and this is actually one of the great success stories of the last 15 years on firearms law. In a number of parts of the country, the U.S. Attorney, in conjunction with local authorities has worked aggressively on enforcing the federal law that makes it unlawful for a convicted felon to possess not only firearms but even one piece of ammunition. Places like Boston and Richmond both experienced dramatic reductions in violent crime and murder rates when the word was put out. If you're a convicted felon and we catch you with a gun, you're going to go to federal prison for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. I've got to kind of rein you in on that, or at least in my opinion. Let me clarify for you something that I'm a strong believer in, and it's something you don't know. One, I am a felon. And I am a felon because I owned a firearms business, and I was set up by the ATF and did 3 years in a federal prison. Now, I've never had any kind of criminal activity in my life before or after, and yet they had judged me as a violent felon, which I essentially got the courts to overturn. But in the meantime, not only am I, but my entire family is limited and barred from ownership and possession of firearms. Now, because they live in my home, so therefore they can't have one because that would put me in constructive possession, right?
Right.
So, in addition to that, the problem is that, and I don't disagree with you, that we need to ban and bar criminals who have either committed a violent crime already and shown a lawless position. But in addition to that, anyone who has a long-term history, even though they may not necessarily be violent, of thwarting and lawlessness. So I'm okay with that. But I have a problem with a kid who's 19 years old and gets caught with a half ounce of weed in his car and then is charged with a felony. And at 45 or 50 years old, he's completely changed his life. He's married, has children, a good job, maybe runs a business, and is still permanently prevented from owning firearms.
Yeah, and there's there's several interesting aspects to this question. One of them is that there has been, ever since the Gun Control Act of 1968, there has been a provision in federal law that, at least theoretically, allows people who have had no subsequent history, who've been effectively clean for
decades,
and there are a surprising number of people who did something stupid when they were 19,
of course,
and nothing since.
But Congress refuses to fund the ATF to do the checks and the background checks to clear those people. So the law exists, and yet they refuse to fund it as a de facto way of effectively barring anyone with a felon from ever having possession again.
Right. There's a case that's actually working its way through up the courts right now that may actually lead to something interesting happening, and that is among the other categories of people that the Gun Control Act of 1968 prohibited from gun ownership were people that had been convicted of common law misdemeanors that could potentially have a sentence of more than 2 years. And there was a man in Maryland who came back from Vietnam, got into a fist fight with someone who apparently had attacked him the previous week in a bar, was convicted under Maryland's common law assault and battery statute. Now, 30-something years later, having had absolutely no criminal history since then, and having served no time for that fist fight, he's still prohibited from owning a firearm. And there was the Court of Appeals went ahead and heard a challenge that Alan Gura had filed, the attorney who won the D.C. versus Heller case, and they basically said, look, we're not prepared to go along with your attempt to have us strike down the common law misdemeanor proposal. The real problem here is, and it's sort of in a subtle way said, but essentially they say, Congress should be actually funding this relief from disabilities program. That's really where the issue is.
Right. I'd love to learn more about that case. If you wouldn't mind, I'll send you my email, and maybe you could email me a link to it. I'd love to follow it because I actually appealed my own case and dragged it all the way to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and won. Mm-hmm. And one rung short of the Supreme Court. And I did it on a manual typewriter, I might add.
and this is, by the way, a surprising. This is one of those complex problems where I sort of sympathize with the Court of Appeals' reluctance to just arbitrarily do this because, as they pointed out, there are people like this man in Maryland who, done nothing wrong for 30-something years, and at the same time, there are also people with these common law misdemeanor convictions who, in fact, have fairly long, nasty criminal histories.
Sure.
And essentially, the problem is, Congress is abusing its discretion and refusing to fund this relief program. We've also got some fairly confusing decisions by the court on this. People that are convicted of felonies in foreign nations are not prohibited.
Right. So you can have a felony over there, but you can come here and possess a firearm here.
Right.
And yet, by the way, there are many states where many nations where I cannot visit because as a convicted felon, I'm not actually given a visa for entry into their nation. So,
right.
Talk about a double standard, right? We've got a hard break coming up, and if you don't mind sticking with us until after that break, we'll get back into our topic of conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find Mr. Cramer's website at claytoncramer.com, and you'll see a host of links up there where you can find more information, a number of his testimonies, articles written, books, all kinds of things. And so Mr. Clayton will return with us in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. In response to the school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, the state's neighbor, New York, is set to pass tough new gun laws today.
The bill bans assault weapons, restricts ammunition, and requires reporting mentally ill with illegal guns. There are several provisions pushed for by Senate Republicans, including a new felony for carrying a firearm on school grounds.
Fox News Radio's Courtney Keeley. A 5-year-old girl taken in Philadelphia is found alone crying for help in a park outside the city. Police are looking for the woman who took her from school. Retail sales up, wholesale prices down.
Retail sales for December were up 0.5%, topping expectations. Producer prices, on the other hand, fell a more than expected 0.2% from November, but the core index factoring out food and energy matched the estimate, up 0.1%.
Fox Business Network's Diane Macedo. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Here we go with round 2 of Hope and Change. Looking forward looks bumpy and rocky. Nobody's stimulated by high unemployment and tax increases. Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance can help you be ready to face the challenges of the next 4 years. We have long-term food storage, ammunition, informational books and DVDs, water purifiers, and a whole lot more. Come see us at 3225 Highway 62 East, Suite number 3, just a half-mile past Walmart in Mountain Home, or call us at 492-4030. That's Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance.
Okay, class, let's all sing our 911 song. There's a fire, there's a fire.
Dial 911.
There's a fire, there's a fire.
Dial 911.
If you can't raise an arm,
dial 911.
If you're suddenly having trouble speaking these words,
dial 911.
Face suddenly goes all numb,
dial 911.
All of a sudden get the worst headache of your life,
dial 911.
Sudden loss of sight in one or both eyes,
dial 911.
If you think stroke may be the cause, never wait to call,
dial 911.
911. Making a difference in someone's life is elementary. Know the sudden signs of stroke and dial 911 immediately if they appear. Time lost is brain lost. For more information, visit powertoendstroke.org. Brought to you by the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Complete service and satisfaction is the Earls Dodge Jeep difference from all the other dealers in the Ozarks. Hello, I'm Janet, and I invite you to come check out our new and pre-owned on the lot at Earls Dodge Jeep on North Highway 63 across from the fairgrounds in West Plains, where we go out of our way to make you happy. That means doing what it takes to make sure you're satisfied with your total package on your new purchase, which means taking care of you after the sale. It all adds up at Earls Dodge Jeep, where buying a vehicle is as simple as it should be.
From the Point Weather Center, for tonight, mostly clear with a low around 16. Tomorrow, mostly sunny and a high near 36. Then tomorrow night, mostly clear with a low around 18. On Wednesday, sunny and a high near 44. Wednesday night, partly cloudy, low around 28. On Thursday, mostly sunny and a high near 44. Thursday night, mostly clear, low of 23. Wrapping up the work week on Friday with sunny skies and a high near 45. Friday night, mostly clear with a low around 28. I'm Chris Earl Phillips. For more information, check out our website, the all-new my1071thepoint.com.
America's Voice Now with Michael Evans.
We're back with Mr. Clayton Cramer. Those of you who would like to find more information from Mr. Cramer, you can visit his website at ClaytonCramer.com. That's C-R, C like Charlie, R-A-M-E-R.com. So here's my concern, Mr. Cramer, and that is that we are utilizing a limitation on legitimate and lawful firearms owners, and simultaneously blatantly ignoring the mental health imbalances that we have in our nation. And I can't see how, banning 99.999% of America based on a 0.0001% danger rate is fair and equitable in anybody's estimation, nor is it even constitutional or illegal.
Well, and here's one of the interesting things is you push down on one part of the process and something else pops up. Into the 1960s, people that had been involuntarily committed for mental illness lost a great many of their civil liberties. In fact, and I would agree, they lost too many of them. They lost the right to make contracts. They lost the right to vote.
Sure.
They lost driver's licenses, even if they were not really a problem in those areas. And sometimes even after being released from a mental hospital, it would take months to years, sometimes a lawyer in some states to get those rights back.
In some states, you still cannot vote if you have a felony in your history, period.
Right.
Even after you've completed your probation and all the rest of that. So,
right.
It's a permanent disability.
Right. And the difficulty here is that we went from a situation where people would suffer these severe disabilities as a result of involuntary commitment to one where the courts were reluctant to hospitalize people under any conditions, even once this very complicated disability scheme went away. One of the consequences is that, for example, the shooter in Newtown, Connecticut, we know from the press accounts that his mother was attempting to get him hospitalized. She was obviously concerned about either his safety or that of others, and was trying to make this happen. And Connecticut, like most states now, has made it very difficult to get someone hospitalized against their will.
Right.
And in the case of the shooter in Colorado, James Holmes, his psychiatrist was attempting to have the police do something about this. She obviously had heard something from what he was saying that gave her reason to be concerned about what he was likely to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this was about 3 weeks before he went into the theater and started shooting people. So,
we're ignoring the real cause here and dealing with a tool that's used, but by a defective mind.
Right, and the other thing that's unfortunate is by the focus on the guns misses the fact that we have a lot of murders by mentally ill offenders in this country that do not involve firearms.
Sure.
You may recall the Staten Island Ferry massacre some years ago, where a guy pulled a sword out and started killing people with it.
Right.
The only thing that stopped him was an off-duty police officer drew a gun on him. Well, that was not the first time that the guy with the sword had come to the attention of authorities. A week or two before, he had been taken into custody because he was standing on a street corner screaming, "I am going to kill. God told me so." And he was hospitalized for a few days, given some medications, and told to come back to a psychiatrist for outpatient treatment. And the next thing anyone's heard of him, he's on this rampage.
Standing on a ferry with a sword, slashing away.
Yeah,
he's
amazing. Out now.
And he's out now?
Yeah.
Great. Here, I had a discussion yesterday with Dr. Bart Rossi, who's a clinical psychologist. One of the things he talked about in relation to the mental illness thing is that we have a stigma here, a national stigma, about mental illness and obtaining treatment. And I agree with that issue because it makes people afraid to go seek it. But I have to tell you that I'm also very concerned about the fact that once you do receive mental health treatment, you are then permanently labeled as a problem. And so effectively an individual who may have a short-term problem in their life where they've lost their wife or they've lost their job or their credit card bills have become so insurmountable they don't know where to turn, and they do go to seek mental health. Those people, and especially under Obamacare now, with full access to all of our medical records, including mental health, would now have the ability to say, we're going to adjudicate this person as not qualified under the Second Amendment to own a firearm because we adjudicate them as a dangerous person. Even though the guy may go out and get a better job and suddenly his problems evaporate, or maybe his marriage does finally break up and he goes and finds another person that is the love of his life. Or maybe it's a child who has a problem in school with being bullied and goes and seeks some counseling for that, but now is permanently adjudicated a mental defective. And I have a problem with that, because people are imperfect.
Well, that's not what the law actually requires. The Gun Control Act of 1968 specified that people that had been either adjudicated, and that means that there has to have been an actual something like due process involved to come to that decision as mentally defective.
Yeah, but we don't see due process in anything they do, and 19 executive orders proves it. That's not due process.
Well, and that's what I say. There are some things that they can do by executive order that probably are constitutional. But they're, for the most part, things on which there'd be relatively little controversy. For example, actually enforcing the existing felon in possession statute. There are other aspects of this, however, that are almost certainly not going to be constitutional and would almost certainly run into due process problems. As an example, the Clinton administration at one point, the Veterans Administration had taken about 100,000 veterans who had been suffering from PTSD and put them into the background check system as disqualified from firearms ownership.
Right.
And that was done without due process, and it's one of the reasons that when Congress passed H.R. 2640 in response to the Virginia Tech shooting, one of the things that it had in it was a requirement that merely having PTSD was not sufficient basis to be put onto that background check system.
But now they're doing it actually without that. They're actually going through and having doctors adjudicate these individuals as disqualified without any kind of due process opportunity for these individuals to redress that and say, wait a second, hold on a minute. You got to have more than just a doctor's opinion who happens to work for the Army.
Well, that will not survive court challenge. We've got a very robust set of case law on the definition of what constitutes due process, and requires things like independent decision maker, opportunity to confront witnesses against you, and requirement that you have to be notified of it. There's a number of things that due process requires, and there's absolutely no reason for the courts to accept the mere opinion of one doctor for something which is a lifelong disability. Mm-hmm. Now, it is the case that on a temporary or a short-term basis, it may in fact make perfect sense to hold someone for observation.
Sure, and I buy that. I mean, I get it. If the guy is having, and again, the same applies to the guy who may have just lost his job and his wife decides to leave and his kids are vacating the house, and he is under so much stress that for a short period of time, maybe he should not be in possession of a firearm. Yeah. Not just because he might be a danger to himself, but others around him. But at some point in time, there has to be, that event ends. And then that individual is, but unfortunately, that individual may well be permanently disabled as a result of that event occurring in his life, which may have had a window of no more than 30 or 60 or 90 days.
Yep. I can tell you that, for example, the state of Colorado, if you are involuntarily committed there for, I think it's more than 90 days, your name gets added to the national background check system for firearms disability, but after you've been released from mental hospital, if 3 years elapses without you again being involuntarily committed, they pull your name back out of that list, which I did not even know it was possible to do. But apparently there is some provision for them to make a correction to that. And
do you have to ask for that correction, or is it done automatically?
It appears from the way the statute is written that it is automatic. And we have examples in other states of similar schemes. For example, California is one of the states where if you have been involuntarily committed for mental health problems, you are subject to a 5-year firearms disability. But when the 5 years is up, your firearms disability is also up.
I have to tell you, part of the problem, as I see it here, is not necessarily this question of even mental health, but there has been a total societal fabric breakdown. that has been engendered by our government by turning us all into this dependent class who believe that the government is the absolute beginning and end all of all permissions, all authority, all ability to function, your food, your housing, your clothing. I mean, the problem is that our society is broken. This isn't just a question of mental health or otherwise. There's a greater problem here, and I think we're missing that as well, because honestly, the mental health issue is really just a symptom of that larger problem as well.
Yeah, there's been a loss of a concept that I call Christian commonwealth. Until the early 1960s, there was a set of assumptions that were common throughout Western civilization, not just the United States, but all across Western Europe as well. And one of them was that all of us had some level of duty or obligation through the government to provide certain basic minimum requirements for life, to make sure that people, no matter how miserable and desperate they were not to a point of starving. They had shelter. If they were desperately sick, mentally ill, for example, there would be some sort of assistance for them. And we pretty much abandoned that in the individualism of the 1960s.
We've got a hard break coming up. You could hear the music in the background there. Sorry, but this is capitalism in its fullest form. I'm gonna ask you if you don't mind to just hang on for this break, and then when we come back, you can kind of close that thought out, and we can finish up. Would you do that?
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much. Folks, you're listening to America's Voice Now. Our special guest this morning is Clayton Cramer. You can find his information at ClaytonCramer.com. World-renowned author and critical thinker on the Second Amendment and issues surrounding it. I encourage you to learn more about him. We'll be right back.
I know what you're thinking, Bunk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Dirty Harry gets all his ammo from the battery station. John Rambo, you guessed it. He gets his ammo from the battery station, too. So if you need ammo, go to the place where the guys who know about ammunition go. The battery station. They have one of the largest supplies of ammunition in the area. So make sure you're stocked up and don't get low on shells. Go to the battery station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains.
If all those taxes go up, all of them go up, because no deal is made, that's a recession that Obama can't take. He would become Herbert Hoover Obama, and his whole second term and his historical legacy would be destroyed right here in the first weeks of his re-election. He can't take that.
That's Larry Kudlow, Saturdays 3 until 6 on 107.1 The Point.
America's Voice Now with Michael Evans.
All right, we're back, and we are joined again with Clayton Cramer, who is our special guest this morning. Mr. Cramer has a long history of testimony in front of Congress. He has numerous articles, books. He is widely accepted as an expert on firearms, Second Amendment, constitutional issues, and even mental health issues. And that is the topic of our conversation this morning. So you were mentioning earlier before the break, and we kind of got sidetracked. So why don't you just continue with your thought?
Oh, yeah. As I said, there was this consensus that existed really until the early 60s of, there were certain obligations that we as a society had towards the weakest and most desperate members of our society. And unfortunately, in the 1960s, progressives turned this from we have an obligation to help those in need to, people in need should have everything that everyone else has.
Right.
And in a sense, they poisoned the well. Suddenly, an awful lot of people that might otherwise have supported the idea of a compassionate government providing at least the
basic minimal needs.
The basic minimal needs began to start to say, well, we're not sure that the government has any obligation to do that at all. And so this creeping individualism sort of took over to the point where we started to abandon the traditional concern we had for the mentally ill. What purported to be a concern for the rights of the mentally ill really turned into basically a lack of interest, a lack of concern for what happened to them. And the consequences weren't just in mass murders or even the individual murders. It was also things like homelessness became a big problem in the late 70s.
You got a guy living in a refrigerator box on the side of Fifth Avenue, and the ACLU is standing there saying he's got a right to do that if he so chooses.
Right. and the consequences, one of the things I found very depressing while writing this book was between 1974 and 1984, the number of people that froze to death in the United States more than doubled.
Wow.
In the state of Oregon, the Portland Oregonian newspaper about 10, 12 years ago published a series of articles about how about the dozens of examples they could find of mentally ill Oregonians who had starved themselves to death while family and police watched, by law prohibited from intervening.
Oh my goodness!
This is where this extreme notion of individual rights can take you. That's why there's got to be a little bit of common sense. But once the ACLU gets involved, common sense goes right out the door.
Well, I think part of the problem here is that all of these issues incorporate something called mission creep, right? Yes. We start with this principle that is going to be what some would initially believe is a good idea, and unfortunately, it continues to snowball, and this is the nature of government in general. And that's my concern with having an executive order issued, or 19 executive orders issued by a president, is that we get into this situation where mission creep becomes the rule. And it starts out as a benign limitation on very few, and then it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs because everybody says, well, I'm not watching that. Well, we can't all watch everything. And so, and our press has completely abdicated their responsibility to us as a watchdog of government. So since we don't have a press to do it anymore, the individual, there's no possible way for all of us to just keep pace on what's happening. And so essentially what we end up with is this situation that starts out as a benign, small opportunity to help and turns into this, complete limitation on all. A perfect example is the limitation on felons, right? I mean, how many guys have been convicted of a white-collar crime and yet are barred from ever owning a firearm? I mean, there is just no correlation between a white-collar crime and that may have happened in your 20s or 30s, and you're now 50 or 60 years old, and you're still permanently barred from owning a firearm. It's a perfect example of it.
Yeah, and the other thing that's sort of interesting is that we have been advancing forward through domestic violence misdemeanors. Now, in some cases, the people that these domestic violence misdemeanors, you read the descriptions of them, and you say, why in the heck was this only charged as a misdemeanor? I mean,
yeah, right. You got a guy who clearly is beating his wife to a bloody pulp, and he's entitled to a free ride, including, by the way, a few members of Congress, and yet a kid who's caught with 4 joints in his sock is permanently barred from owning a firearm 40 years later. I don't get it.
The problem is that everyone is pushing to. They're using strategies that don't work, and because they don't work, they have to keep making them broader and broader and broader.
Sure.
The 1994 federal assault weapons ban was unsuccessful. Even the criminologists the Clinton administration hired concluded that it made no difference in murder rates or mass murders or police officers murdered. On the other hand, we do, in the case of the mental illness issues, have pretty good evidence of things that do work.
Clayton, I remember in the 1960s, kids used to ride the subway in New York, in Manhattan now, on their way to school, and they used to carry a .22 target rifle in between their knees. And when they got there, they went down into the basement of the school where the shooting range was, and they kept their rifle down there while they went up to classes at the end of the day or during their course of their day. They went downstairs, did their target shooting, and then went on to class, and then rode home in the subway with a rifle.
Well, of course. So why would you be afraid of a person with carrying a rifle?
I mean, it's just beyond comprehension. But today, I mean, even mere possession of a firearm in New York City will end up, putting you in prison for an extraordinarily long period of time. You have a new book out called My Brother Ron, and it is a personal and social history of the deinstitutionalization of the mentally ill. And that really touches very heavily on the subject that we're having this morning. Folks, if you'd like to get a hold of that, you can find that on Amazon.com. Just type in My Brother Ron, and you'll have an opportunity to even download the Kindle version of this for, it's very inexpensive.
$1.49.
$1.50, folks. I mean, gee whiz, you can't beat that with a lead pipe. So, and Clayton swinging. So, What I would encourage you to do is get a hold of that and take a look at that. Also, find Clayton's blog itself, where he has a ton of information on there relating to all of the articles that he's written, other books that he has written, a lot of his congressional testimony. Really a true expert on this subject. And I thank you very, very much for joining with us this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
I'm gonna give you a call offline, and we'll try to set something up for a Saturday, because I'm telling you, our phone bank was lit up like a Christmas tree. It might be a good opportunity for our listeners to have an opportunity to ask you some questions directly. Sure. So we'll talk about that. Hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Have a great day, folks. That was Clayton Cramer, who joined us this morning. As I mentioned earlier, he has a brand new book out called My Brother Ron, A Personal and Social History of the Deinstitutionalization of the Mentally Ill. Now, there's a Kindle edition that you can get on Amazon for $1.50, and I would encourage you to get out there and do that. One, because it's a great read, and two, because it will help to support Clayton in his efforts to work towards driving the appropriate behavior and the appropriate direction of our nation where it relates to this kind of thing. You can find his website at ClaytonCramer.com. That's Clayton, Clayton, Cramer, Cramer.com. I encourage you to get out there and visit that. He's got book reviews and all kinds of links and stuff up there. Okay, I want to remind you folks, by the way, tomorrow we are going to have Mark Walters on with us. He is our special guest for tomorrow. Mark Walters is going to be talking about these executive orders on guns. He's a concealed carry expert, the author of Lessons from Armed America, and he is the host of the nationally syndicated Armed American radio program. So I would encourage you to make sure that you're joining us tomorrow at this time, and a perfect second interview that relates exactly to what we're talking about today. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. It's Mike in Oregon County.
Hey, Mike in Oregon County.
Wonderful show today. I just wanted to thank you for coming last night and giving such a good talk to our group.
Well, thank you. Mike had a property rights organization meeting last night, the first of its kind down in Thayer. And so if you're down in that area and you're interested in property rights, and property rights, by the way, folks, just doesn't mean if you're a farmer. Property rights is everything. That's gun rights, that's money rights, that's rights to the home you live in and property you own, including your automobile and your everything that you own, from your iPad to your shoelaces. So I encourage you to communicate with Mike. Mike, do you have a phone number where they can call you?
Sure, 417-264-2435.
That's 417-264-2435. And I would encourage each and every one of you to join this property rights organization down in that local chapter if it's in your geographic area. And I'll tell you why. The property rights organization that's up in Mountain View, and the one that is down in Arkansas are making great strides in protecting property rights, not only of farmers and ranchers and individual landowners, but across the board. These are activists who are working on our and your behalf. And so it's incumbent on you to play a role. If you're not in it, you can't possibly win it, folks.
And Mike, anyone who contacts me who wants to be able to get in touch with the other groups, if they're closer to Arkansas, they're closer to Mountain Grove, Howell County.
Sure. You can provide them with some information on how they can get a hold of those groups.
Wonderful.
Outstanding. Hey, thank you, sir. Thanks very much. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come down and chat with your group yesterday.
Well, thank you for making it. Everybody loved what you had to say.
All right. Thanks so much. Folks, I do public speaking engagements like that. If you have an opportunity, if you'd like me to speak at your church or with your group, a civic group, an organization, I'd be more than happy to do that. You can send me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. Be more than happy to come in one evening and speak with your church group. Folks, if you're not paying attention to church groups and the capabilities that they have towards working towards a communal goal, I don't want to hear the argument of separation of church and state. We're all Americans first and foremost, and if we're not keeping that in the forefront of our minds, we are certainly not going to be able to handle the elimination of our right to exercise the right of religion. And so let's deal with Americans first and worry about what religious denomination you are and all the rest of that later. I'd like you to visit Stone Construction at 293-0116. Get a hold of Bill Stone if you have a local project that you're working on. He handles all kinds of construction and new construction, remodels, and so forth. Also, make sure that you visit our friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery. Mary, can be reached at 255-2253, and she is at number 2 Evans Arcade on the Square. Also, while you're here on the Square, get over there to Wits End and get a haircut at the Classic Barber Shop. Feels like you stepped back about 50 or 60 years. $10 haircuts, great old-time hot lather with a straight razor shave. It's got a zero-gravity chair over there that it'll just blow your mind. It's like a full-body massage and zero gravity. So talk to him about that when you get a chance. Get over there and make sure you get a crack at that. It'll really impress you. Also, make sure you visit our friends at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance, that Ozark MTN Self-Reliance, 870-492-4030, and our friends at the Battery Station, 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains, 257-7799, batterystation.com. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can also find us at facebook.com/America's Voice Now and YouTube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll have this audio up there today. Thank you.
107.1, The Point, KBMV, Birch Tree, West Plains.
Fox News Radio, I'm Dave Anthony. President Obama considering a list of possible new gun restrictions. Fox News Radio's Rich Johnson's live in Washington.
Dave, there are 19 items on that list submitted by Vice President Biden that can be done through executive order.